Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where we will be continuing the Davriel Kane saga that is Children of the Nameless, which is proving to be a bit longer than anticipated. We are getting about 30 pages done each episode, which is great. Also, say hi, Joe.
I'm a master interior decorator.
I can see that.
Did you not see it fall down during your intro?
I didn't, but I love that.
Okay. Go ahead and look up what you're going to say next while I figure this out.
So Davriel sees them and he's like, oh, the sealing stone. Yeah, that's just a piece of rock with a simple dampening ward set on it. He goes, your songs are very much more potent than that. And as they're going back up, Rom explains to her, the sealing stone's magic isn't that powerful. Yeah, but it doesn't need to be. It's here to shelter the souls of the faithful, and the charm is simple, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And he tells them that's the problem with people being as smart as Davriel. When you're that smart, you get used to figuring things out in your head, and when the real world doesn't match up, you just make excuses. Which is a really weirdly wise thing for this guy to just to say about like people that think, oh, I'm the smartest person in the room. I know what's what, without considering that other people might actually have a better idea of what's going on than you. Basically, Tasenda thinks, okay, he's like really rushing to get to the carriage. He must have an idea of what to do next, right? Mm-hmm. And she's like, well, what do you have? And he goes, I have decided that I'm going to take a nap. And I absolutely love that chapter 13 opens up with a 3-word sentence. He meant it. And there he is, just laying down in his cabbage, napping. While
his cabbage?
Did I say cabbage?
You said cabbage. I want you to put a picture of cabbage when you say it.
Cool. That works great. His carriage, his cabbage carriage. He's sitting in his carriage and he's taking a nap. And then you have the other 3, Crunchnar, Tasenda, and of course, the Voluptera herself. All 3 sitting at a campfire just talking. And so Crunchstar then says, we could make a deal. See, I must keep Davriel alive for another 16 years, but perhaps we could find a way to stun him, hold him captive. He acts mighty, but he has no power of his own, only what he steals. We could imprison him, and you could become the lady of the manor, rule in his place. And like he's like standing up, looming beside the fire, and it's like there's harsh light, terrible shadows all over the place. I would serve you and deal with any who question your rule. I would make no try for your soul. I want only his. In 16 years, I would leave you no tricks. And Jacinda's like, I'm
good.
Well, the thing is, she starts humming the warding song, but just because she's like worried. And then he like goes, there's no need for that. And she starts like humming louder. And Miss Hyra's like, hey, Crunchnar, go, leave. Get out of here. There's something in the forest. You should go deal with it, whatever it is. Go find out what it is. Jacinda's like, no, I'm not going to do that. and then Highwater explains, look, your music hurts me. I wish I could hear you sing a song that would not try to kill me, because you seem to play really well.
Like, have you ever thought about doing this for a living?
And so, other than the warding song, she starts to think about the song of joy she used to sing in the fields when they'd be picking the dust willow. And then she's like, well, that song's dead now. And she asks Highwater, what do you think about like predestination, basically? And she says, Highwater responds, did you know that I was the first demon he summoned once he reached this land? None of us had ever heard of him. We were newly free from this hell vault, and we'd been there for what seemed like an eternity. It was a relatively short time, admittedly, but once free, we've begun eagerly seeking contracts. And she's thinking, I would make quick work of this dandy with the exaggerated clothing and the lazy way of speaking. So she rushed into the contract and then applied herself fully to seducing him. And he didn't even glance at her before sending her to count the currency in the former lord's coffer. And over the next few days, she literally tried every trick she could think of. But each time that he would see her, he would just give her another task. And she says, there I am, looking positively radiant. And he just walks past and hands me a list of the price of livestock on it. He is absolutely infuriating. And it's at that point that he explains that it was because he loved the work that she had done. He loved her contracts, and he was like, this is the perfect person to go over my things. And that she actually kind of found it charming because it didn't care what she looked like. He summoned her for what she could do. She goes, I am quite good at contracts. And I always prided myself on that. And so as a result, I was actually very good at what I was doing. She goes, I'm not ashamed of who I am or what I look like, but it is nice to be recognized for something else. So it's like a nice, once again, they humanize, this guy manages, Brandon Sanderson. I haven't said his name this whole time. Brandon Sanderson is the guy who wrote this story. He did an excellent job writing this story. He was able to humanize demons, but also maintain the demoniaty of them. I love it. And then Krishnar shows back up and he's like, it was a banshee. I scared it off. And then she starts thinking about the Song of Warding, Descenda does. And she says that it first manifested when she was protecting her family. And it simply happened. She didn't create the song. She didn't come up with the song. It was literally a gift from the bog. And so she was thinking that must be proof of her destiny. And then a voice whispers in her, like inside of her, that and more. And then she starts to pluck at a melody. It's not the Song of Warding, and it's not the song, the Song of Joy. And she's completely absorbed in the music. And in that moment, she feels as though the song is coming through her, as if her very soul is the instrument. And the viola is only an amplifier for what she's doing. And so she sings of loss, of death, of the progress of time, of unchanging woods that watches villages that rise and fall, faith that burns bright and dies out, children that grow to elderly people, forgotten as generations pile on top of one another, as infinite fires burn to ash, of a girl who was forced to stop her joyful music and instead sing only for the night. And as she's singing this, it kind of just like reverberates off of her, right? And starts to wash over everybody.
Reverberates.
Exactly. Miss Highwater's ledger is on the ground. Crunchnar is like, his jaw is slack. And Miss Highwater says, what happened? I felt I was flying. And Crunchnar says, I was kneeling in the molten pools of Dawnhearth, and the fires, they were going out. And then he like starts like feeling at his body, and he's looking around, and like he's just really disoriented, right?
Yeah.
Because what they're seeing are basically like things ending, stuff like that, right? The vastness of everything is what the song was about. Beginnings and ends, kind of thing. Eternity.
Hmm.
And then the carriage door slams open, and Davriel just scrambles out, and he goes straight to Descenda. His eyes are wide open, and he goes, "What did you do?" And she's like, I sang. He goes, that was not a simple warding. And his eyes blur with white smoke. He goes, what are you? And he slams his mind into hers. And all he feels is the resounding no. And this music surges from her, and she shouts. And there's this flash of light, and there's fragments and sparks. And Davriel is slammed away from her, and he's flung 10 feet and crashed into the side of the coach. And he is very confused. Crunchnar takes up his sword. He puts it right out to kill the girl. He's ready. Miss Highwater has her dagger pressed against her Descenda's throat. And she goes, what did you do? She goes, I don't know. And Davriel just kind of gets up. There's like leaves on his shirt, and he's like... And Descenda's freaking out because she just almost, like, it looks like she might have almost killed Davriel. She definitely attacked him, and there's a knife at her neck, and there's a demon that's ready to kill her. And all he says is, ouch. And he goes, Miss Highwater, I do believe I have marred this wood with an indentation made by my skull. And she says, it's always been obvious to me which of the two was harder. So basically, Davriel says, do you have any idea what is inside your mind? She's like, songs, you tried to steal them from me. You tried to take my powers like you did to the hunters. And he goes, yeah, a lot of good it did. And he takes out a small light, and a little greenish energy shield that goes over his hand. He goes, all I got was a simple protection ward, which is what I expected to find inside of you. But when I touched it, I found that there was something behind it, something deeper, something grander. Do you have any idea what it is? And she's like, no.
Also, give me my ward back.
And he frowns and looks at her, and he turns back towards the cavern, and she goes, Davriel? And he goes, I don't remember giving you permission to use my first name. And she goes, well, I don't remember giving you permission to reach into my mind. And she goes, do you know what it is? The thing that you found inside of me? And he goes, it's time to go to the bog. So basically, Davriel has just realized that is another entity inside of her. He is not the only one with an entity.
Mm-hmm.
And he thinks back to when it was 5 years ago when he first had the entity enter his body. And with it came the ability to walk between planes of existence. To this day, we don't quite understand how the entity and planeswalking coexist. We do know that the entity itself is a fragment of a plane, the spirit, the world soul of a dead plane. So basically imagine a plane imploding in on itself, and what's left is the entity. So Davriel has his entity inside of him, and the moment he gained it, he yoinked it out of a guy's head, he became a planeswalker. So it's possible that the plane itself is what gave him the ability, which doesn't make a ton of sense, or that the plane is able to trigger the spark. It doesn't require trauma or meditation or anything like that. It just automatically triggers the spark as soon as it enters the body.
Wait, but if it was a stolen thing, wouldn't his spark go away eventually?
That's the thing. If it's an artificial spark given by having the plane inside it, having the entity, it's not right to call it a plane. It's not a plane anymore, it's an entity. Having the entity inside of him could be what causes it. And the entity had promised him worlds upon worlds that could be his. And he reached into the entity, and the entity gave him this huge boost, and he wound up killing his entire army.
Oof.
And there was that point that Davriel was like, you know what? It's not worth it. And there was that point that he had left that plane. And so he looks at Descenda, because he thinks to himself, that was the exact same sensation I got. When I touched the entity for the first time, I got the same sensation I just got when I touched Descenda's mind. So she has an entity. But you may know she's not a planeswalker, but she has the entity. That's weird. The entity explains that is not the full entity. It's only a part of it. And that's why I can't speak to her. It just kind of gives her the songs. It gives her notions and emotions. And that's basically the reason that it works the way it does. Again, it kind of keeps going back and forth. And the entity explains that if Davriel takes that entity from her and basically consumes it, then he'll be even stronger than he was before, because he can just steal it. And so eventually they get to the bog. And they get out, and Davriel's like, ugh, bog. And Descenda's like, somehow I knew it had to come back here. And so she goes to the edge of the bog, and she looks into it, and it's like this black pit, right? It's not necessarily like dark water. It's as if there was no light at all that hits the thing, and it absorbs everything. And so Davriel reaches in with his mind, because if she has part of the entity, the rest of it must be in the bog, right? That would make sense.
Yeah.
And so he reaches into the bog, and there's nothing there. But like the thing is, he can feel like a presence as though something had been there. There's an emptiness beneath the bog.
He goes, I did it. I took the boog.
The boog.
The boog.
So Davriel realizes that if the bog itself is empty, that must mean it's somewhere else. And if only part of it is in Descenda, someone else must have the rest of the bog. Someone must have taken it from the bog. And that means that person is most likely the one controlling the spirits, because the spirits are of the bog as well. And they've recognized the boggy bog of everything. And so as a result, they didn't kill Descenda because they recognize it as similar to their master. So Descenda's kneeling by the bog. And she's thinking, she believed in the bog this whole time. And Davriel's saying it hasn't been there for years. That's weird. She believed in it. She dumped her parents into the bog. It can't be gone. And then a voice says, Descenda. And it's like she's looking at it, and she can see the face of her mother reflected in the dark, inky depths. And she's like,
Martha?
She reaches out, and her fingertips touch the top of the bog. And then the water is super warm, like blood. And then Miss Highwater grips her and basically pulls her away.
I would say warm like blood is an odd descriptor, but then I remember what plane we're on.
Yeah, exactly.
Carry on.
Par for the course in this kind of plane. And so Miss Highwater grabs her, yanks her up, and is like, we gotta go. There's geists, and there's literally everywhere. They're just pouring out of the forest. There's even more of them than there were before. It seems like there's even more than there were in the village. Davriel goes, Miss Highwater, which peasant is in charge of grading this roadway? Should we happen to survive, I would like to have them flogged. And she goes, well, remember that meeting we had about the tax revenue allocations for maintenance of infrastructure? He goes, no, it sounds boring. And she's like, well, it's you. And she goes, let's just compromise and agree it's Crunchnar's fault. And this is while they're being chased by spirits. This is like Avengers level threat kind of thing. Like
I was gonna say, why is Davriel Tony Stark?
Yeah, they're very quippy. Very, very quippy. But the fact that they do not care is what is so endearing about them. And so the Whisperers continue to chase after them, and eventually the carriage tips over because of everything that's going on. And it's at that point that we're going to stop it.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with some more Children of the Legendary Lore.
Yeah, pretty much.